I don't even.
Okay.
Good of the cause, since nobody is here. They're waiting,
They've all
aren't they?
left.
Yes, that's correct. They're waiting for any
Okay,
minutes.
reports to the board, policy committee report, January 9th meeting?
No,
No,
I
it was
changed
later
it.
than that, okay.
So that was our January 23rd meeting, I believe. That was
Okay.
in this room on a Thursday. The policy committee met to discuss specific policy changes, which I'm probably going to go through in the next line. And the committee, I think, worked very well together. We started with prior to the meeting through Google Docs sharing comments, and then during the meeting, reflecting on those comments and then finalizing some decisions. So what you have in 5B, policy first reads, is the outcome of our meeting. Our chair for that is Patty Gallagher, and Patty's agreed to continue on as chair, even though she is no longer a Board of Education member. She wasn't quite sure about that in the fall, but she's happy to continue at this point.
Before you go on, I'd like to take the opportunity to publicly thank Favor Smith, Pat Stanton, Mary Werner, and Patty Gallagher, and of course you, Roger, for your dedication on that committee, and the board members as well. So
Thanks.
thank you. It's a tedious job, having served on that committee.
You've been on that committee, so you know.
So,
I will say that, and I think anyone, I know we have other members of the policy committee who are in here. I'll say that the committee at times really enjoys the give and take that goes on, and even though it can be tedious and it can be technical, I think that there is a really kind of lively and enthusiastic approach to the process. So it's about as positive as you can get in a policy committee like that.
5B.
So these are the first reads that were the outcomes, and I think I will try and be brief here. But so there's 4 policies, and I will walk you through and try and give you an overview of what we said. So the first one is 1741 homeschool students policy. Now this was a policy that already existed. Am I getting that one right?
yes.
All right, so this policy we already had, and it only required a change. And the change involved a separate regulation that came down the road from the state last year, which was the elimination of the religious exemption for immunizations. That was a big deal. It meant that some families could no longer utilize their religious exemption to avoid one or another immunization. And so families who were enrolled here, had to make that challenge, that very personal decision to have their children immunized in those areas. That in and of itself was a challenge. But some families did decide, rather than enrolling their child, to homeschool their children because they believe so fervently in the immunization issue. So we have some homeschooled children who are in homeschool for, it could be a number of reasons, but one of them is their belief system and as it's reflected in the immunization. That being said, the law is very clear that the religious exemption applies to anybody who goes to school. So homeschooled students, while they can continue to not have to adhere to the state law that says you're required, as long as you're to be immunized in all these areas, as long as you're at home, have to adhere to that regulation if they participate in our school's extracurricular activities. So homeschool students are welcome to participate in extracurricular activities. They could participate in the spring musical or the middle school play, which are coming up, right? They could participate in clubs, the environmental club. all these things. The one thing they're not allowed to, again, by law, is interscholastic sports. So homeschool students can't participate in interscholastic sports, but can participate in other extracurricular activities. However, now, and the change is in here, now they cannot unless their immunizations are up to date. So, you'll see in this policy draft, and I will not read through it all, a section, a large section that's crossed out, somewhat to address this change, somewhat for clarity's sake. We do a lot of clarity, trying to improve policies. And then there's a red section, which is the additional language. And that red section essentially says what I just said, which was they have to be immunized to participate in extracurricular activities, even when homeschooled. Questions about that? Okay, so that's 1741. Now, the last three are all new policies that the committee is proposing to the board. So they'll either be proposed in the format you see, or you'll suggest changes, and it'll be revised, and then you'll see the policy with those revisions in place. So of the three, I'll start with voter registration for students. So there is a new, I have it here. Oh, let's see. 5605, voter registration for students. So again, usually we get new policies when we get new laws, right? So the new law opens the door for 16-year-olds to pre-register to vote. All right, so up to this point, recently, 17-year-olds have been eligible to pre-register to vote. So in other words, 17-year-olds have filled out the form, and then when they turn 18, they're then automatically on the registration lists. That has now changed to 16. So my 16-year-old son last month filled out the form, and now he'll be registered to vote in a year and a half when it's his birthday. Okay. True for all 16-year-olds. Right? What it also required was schools to provide those 16-year-olds with the opportunity to pre-register to vote. So some of this is incumbent upon us to make sure that they know that this is out there for them, and that they have an opportunity to pre-register, and then the rest is up to the students and their families. So this new policy, very briefly, essentially says just that school will make opportunities available for 16-year-olds to pre-register to vote. While we were at it, we decided right away to put a link to the voter registration page, or voter registration electronic form, right on our website. So if you go to lpcsd.org, first thing you'll probably notice is a little red bar across the top that says 16-year-olds may register to vote here, and can link there. But we'll also be doing things as a part of classrooms and outside of classrooms to make sure that all of our 16-year-olds will have that opportunity. Of course, this is a new policy that has not yet been approved. So once it's approved, it will then be the expectation of what we do. Questions about this one? Third one, red flag law. So some of this reflect, interesting that there's some big issues coming into our school policies, right? We had voter registration. That's a big issue nationwide. Some states are trying to restrict that. New York State is trying to broaden, and what you're seeing with the 16-year-old is an attempt to broaden the registration of our population, right? So to get more young people to vote. But this one, the red flag law, has to do with the risk and threat of weapons. And of course, red flag laws are on the list of legislation that's being debated throughout the country. But New York State last year passed a red flag law, which gave school administrators the additional power to take a situation to court in which there's high risk that there's the threat of a weapon. So if you read through this policy, you'll see essentially the law spelled out in policy. So if you go to the middle of, I don't know, what page, the second page, go to the middle of the second page, there's a section there underneath the note. The note says, as you might remember, are written by our friends at NISBA. They don't become a part of the policy itself. They're there to help us understand what they're recommending so that we make a policy that works. But you can read those as part of that explanation. But the section in the middle is sort of the key part, right? So when a school administrator receives concerns from persons under this policy or has his or her own concerns about a student, he or she must immediately notify the superintendent of schools when determining whether it is appropriate to petition the court. So we have the power to petition the court. Not to guarantee the court will agree, but to petition the court for an extreme risk protection order. The district then has to consider all of the threat factors that are listed there in numbers 1 through 7. And should the court agree, then there'll be a court order to remove or restrict access to weapons for a particular person. And we have the ability to do this according to this policy, according to the law, for any currently enrolled student or student who has been enrolled within the past 6 months. The way I look at this, we tend to rely very heavily on the police, right? And we think the police do a great job around here. When we have issues that we're worried about, we usually work with the police. This provides us with a little extra tool in our tool belt that should we see this kind of risk that we think would put our student body at harm, we could go this route according to this policy. So it is the law. This policy is meant to reflect the law. I don't know what would happen if the school district didn't have a policy that reflected the law, except it wouldn't change the fact that it's still law. And this, I went through and I read the law, and this policy very closely aligns to the law. Questions about the red flag law? Or policy reflecting the red flag law? Last one. Last one's not as controversial, right? School bus idling. So the reason for this did not actually come to us from NISBA. This was not a reflection of a recent state law. Over the past month, we have been audited. Our transportation program has been audited by the state comptroller's office. And the comptroller goes through and tries to make sure that we can provide evidence that we are adhering to current law and regulation and sometimes best practice. Right? So this is not a required policy by certain laws, but the comptroller's office was recommending that our transportation program use this as evidence that we are doing all we can to ensure that we are limiting the amount of exhaust in the air by limiting school bus idling. So it was really the comptroller's office that says, ask your school board to approve a bus idling policy, and then you can require every driver to read and sign off that they've read and understood the policy every year, the way we do with some other mandates. So this one very simply directs us to ensure that we are placing limits on harmful emissions that are being exhausted the air from our buses. It doesn't say you must turn off the bus every time it's stopped. It says to limit, and it provides some exceptions if there's mechanical work being done in order to maintain an appropriate temperature for passenger comfort, which I think here is a pretty big exception, and then in emergency evacuations. But mostly, what it says is we'll minimize to the extent practicable. We did make some of these changes in language. We used the term to the extent practicable, the idling of the bus, including turning off the engine when you can. So, and then that bottom part is actually what the state comptroller wanted to make sure that we were doing. Superintendent schools shall ensure that a copy of this policy, school bus idling, is provided to all drivers and operators of and other appropriate personnel annually. I'm going to work on the language there. I don't think that's grammatically correct. Is provide to all drivers and operators of, and we should probably maybe just highlight that. We might want to fix a little grammar. Any questions or comments on school bus island?
These will come up for second read next time, so if you do have changes, please let Karen know as you read through them.
And that's everything there.
Great.
I'm currently migrating all the policies into Board Docs.
Okay.
So if you were to have clicked on the links up above, it would have taken you right into the Board Docs policies. I have those 000s, the 1000s, 2s, 3s, random other things, done. So.
Great, thank you.
It's been a big effort.
Yes.
Do a lot of policies. Karen's transferring them from one online storage area to another. And it's a lot of work. Thank you.
Superintendent's report.
All right, I keep on going.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about the Housing Committee report, which was a community report. And then I'll talk a little bit about what's coming up with the schools. So first, the Housing Committee report. So you may have tuned into this, right? There was a big study being done in our community about housing. There were two studies. One had to do with short-term rentals, but there is another one having to do with workforce housing, the shortage of housing available to people who work in this community. And this is specifically for the village and the town of North Elba. It doesn't include Wilmington the way the school district does. You know, this local affordable housing shortage certainly impacts the school district as well as does the rest of the community. You know, both because it impacts enrollment, right? That families who cannot afford to live here are not able to enroll their children here or to move into another school district. You know, but also because it impacts our employees who are also looking for affordable housing, and that's either in our communities or outside. So the housing report reported that only 1 in 3 employees of the village or town now live in the village or town. It used to be half, now it's 1 in 3. Those were two big numbers they were looking at, because what they were recommending was that that the community institute efforts to try and return to that, to create enough affordable housing situations to enable half of the village and town employees we're not just talking public employees, we're talking all employees, to live within the community. So now I'm not going to, that's a 100-page report, and I'm not going any farther with it, except to say I thought it was pretty well done, and that the goal is very ambitious, because what it said was 1,500 units are needed to accomplish that goal. Okay. But what it did is it got me to think about our employees, because we typically also look at our employees as struggling to live within the community. So I really wanted to know, Karen and I worked on this together, we wanted to know what percentage of our employees live within our limits, right? So that would include Wilmington, because the school district includes Wilmington. So here's what we came up with. If you look at our entire payroll, there's like 250 people on our payroll. That means our permanent employees, but also our temporary, substitute, and extracurricular employees like our coaches who don't teach here. If you look at that entire payroll, 69% of them live locally. So that's a big number. That's really twice what that low number was that came out of the report for people who work in the village, within the village in town and North Elba boundaries. So 69% live locally, 2 in 3, that's twice the rate of the village and town. If you look at our permanent employees, it goes down a little bit. And I think that makes sense, that temporary people tend to be people who are nearby, right? But if you look at our permanent employees, this includes teachers, TAs, support staff, management, confidential, and administration, that goes down to 62%. So a little under 2/3, but still well more than half. So 62% of our permanent employees live within the school district boundaries. And then the third number is just looking at teachers, and this is actually the lowest percentage And that's 55%. So 55% of our teachers live in the district, which is much higher, of course, than the overall village, and of course, compared a little bit apples to oranges here, but the overall village and town of North Elbit employees, lower, of course, than our permanent, lower, of course, than our entire payroll. So it's still a gap, and I think our teachers and our support staff would tell you it still is challenging to find affordable housing within the community, but it is different. I think that says something about the school district as an employer to our community members, that we are still able to, create a situation where at least a much higher percentage are able to live here. So I will say that the report itself did suggest some policy ideas, some good practices that can help boost workforce housing in this community, and some of those involved public employers like us. And so there's some pretty good ideas in there, which may or may not be the kind of things that we can or want to implement, but I think it's something as a member of this community that we should all look at. So that report, if you look online, there's a website called futurelakeplacid.com. And if you haven't looked at it, you can go there and see like a summary of some of these reports, and then links to, like for this report, there's a link to the presentation, like the PowerPoints, not the whole report's really long, but the PowerPoints are in there as well. And you can also find the one on short-term housing, and that one I think probably has inspired some emotion in this community, and maybe more so than the workforce one. But that workforce one, which is not necessarily unrelated, is focused on a different problem. They do not identify short-term rentals as the top reason for this. They say it's one contributing factor, but there are other contributing factors, and all that stuff I think is really interesting and important for looking at this issue in our community. And we did participate in that. We participated in the survey. I know I was one of those who were interviewed for the report. So school district was a player. Any questions or comments on the housing committee report?
Is that factoid? You mentioned something that we might want to publicize, that we are able to support our workers living locally.
I don't think there would be any problem publicizing it. I think it could be, and that would be up to us. I'm certainly publicizing it right now, so it's not these aren't numbers we are trying to keep hidden. So sure.
I think it's just the contrast between the bulk of that number, Roger, that you were talking about is based on the salaries of the service industry.
Yeah.
And if you compare that to the salaries of even your teachers, in some cases, there's a 40–50% increase.
Absolutely.
And that's where it's linked into.
Where it
but
is.
it's a tough thing when we are a service industry community. And we have a second home market that is, 43% of the local market, so.
Yeah. Okay, and what's going on at the schools? Well, sure have a winter carnival since that was just last weekend. So last week was very eventful around here with the winter carnival activities, mostly at the middle high school, but we also had kindness week at the elementary school, which had a lot going on as well. So overall, I would say it was a successful 77th annual winter carnival. The opening ceremonies were updated and new, and I think were welcomed, and the coronation was fairly traditional. I think overall, my takeaway is that this was a very uplifting and joyful time for our students and staff. There was a lot of positive going on during these events, and I tried to see a lot of it, both the high school events going on at the school and the middle school activities. They did skating and skiing, and there were just some really heartwarming moments. So I think it did provide a needed boost to the spirits and enthusiasm within our schools. That's the historic purpose of Winter Carnival, and it goes way back. So I think this is a special tradition And I would expect, of course, that it's going to continue for many, many years to come. So Winter Carnival is now over, one for the record books, 78th coming up in 363 days.
I do have to say that the lip dubs by all of the classes and the elementary school, really great fun to watch. I just think it's really nice that the faculty takes the time, and the students too. It was just fun to watch.
So, of course, that being done, we're trying to settle back into a little bit more of normal schedule, normal routine. Our first semester report cards are completed, our second semester classes are underway, and at the elementary school, we're back to both the normal scheduled classes during the regular day and then the regular scheduled clubs and activities that they do as a matter of course, that sometimes will take a back seat to the special events, but they're back as an important piece of what students get to do and learn at the elementary school. We also have the arts going on all around us. So this Thursday, 10 of our high school musicians will be participating in the County Music Festival. This year that's at Mariah High School. Then also we have drama occurring, drama and theater. So the Middle School Drama Club will be performing a play called The Panic Broadcast of 1938. If that sounds familiar, it's because of the War of the Worlds broadcast on the radio that year that became famous. So that play, it's about an hour long, will be this Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. That's the Middle School Drama Club. The High School Drama Club is undergoing its regular rehearsals for the spring musical. The spring musical is not until March 27th, but students are rehearsing. Brendan Gotham and Taylor Prosper are the co-directors of that. The production will be Cinderella. And so that is, while seemingly a long way away, I think it will be upon us very quickly. So the arts are alive and well in the class. Also, academic planning is underway. So high school students about this time start thinking about next year. 10th graders will be visiting the Adirondack Education Center next Wednesday, and that gives them a chance to see firsthand the career and technical education classes that exist at the center in all those different areas. So they see that firsthand and then can make decisions about whether or not they want to enroll in those classes or to remain here for their entire day. So that's a really important, that division between 10th grade and 11th grade is a very key decision students make to go in different directions, and these are based on student interests, not school directing them in those ways. So that event's always welcome, that trip to the center where students get to see what they might be taking next year if they choose to do so. And then, all high school class students will be meeting with their counselor, middle school too, in the upcoming weeks to discuss their academic schedules. So it's that time of the year where people start, yes, they're paying attention to now, but they're also looking ahead. And then just some other comments. Next Friday, the 14th, that's a week from this Friday, right? We're going to have a half day of school for students. And the reason for that is we have a half day of staff development. So our professional development team has been planning the events for that day. They have decided to center those activities on K-12 curriculum discussions in every subject. This means getting teachers together from different grade levels in the same subject. So you were hearing about 4th grade math earlier. 4th grade math teacher along with 6th grade math teacher along with 10th grade math teacher talking math curriculum. Right? Same thing in English, science, social studies, foreign language, the arts. Right? All of these different subjects, including special ed teachers there. It's just impossible to do these kinds of things when everyone's, when we're responsible for students during the day. So we're taking advantage of the half day for this what we call vertical curriculum collaborative discussions. That should be good. And then that is followed by a 2-day break, right? And that's the President's Day weekend, which means that both our students and our staff are off Monday and Tuesday, and then back Wednesday. The board, however, doesn't get Tuesday night off. You'll be expected to be here at 6:30, no break for you. sorry about that, but we do wish you all a happy President's Day weekend. And we'll see you at the tail end of that, I guess. That's everything I have. Any questions or comments?
All set? Thank you very much. Information for the board. There's four documents there. Most noteworthy, the Lake Placid Central School Champions of Change letter from NISBA, and also the school calendar.
You're going to get that calendar for approval soon,
Right.
unless you or others make suggestions for change. We are trying to align this with other school districts, so some of those dates are where they are because they work for everybody, not just for us. Probably the most significant is starting at the earliest date. We'll be starting, according to this calendar, if the board approves this calendar, we'll be starting on September 1st, which is well before Memorial Day weekend. Labor Day weekend. So both our staff will start on the 1st and 2nd, then our students will start on the 3rd and 4th, and then there would be the 3-day Labor Day weekend, followed by the rest of the school year. So that's what those are some of the key highlights of this calendar. That does leave us with 3 days off in February, so if the board meeting's on the 16th next year, you're really going to be unhappy. And then a 2-week spring break as always, but starting maybe a week earlier than we sometimes are used to doing for a couple of reasons. One is to match other districts, and the other is because Easter is in the middle of that, on the 4th. And that, again, tends to be a reason, something that people are looking for.
I see this was option 2. Was there an option 1 as well?
There was an option 1, and there was an option 3. We probably shared that with the board maybe a month ago.
Maybe.
I think we put them all up there once. And then we've had a lot of regional discussions, and we were focusing on one option, and then we shifted to this option. It's what most school districts are able to agree upon. There are some boards that are already approving, not the exact same calendar, but something close to this. I believe Tupper Lake approved theirs yesterday. So, again, our board doesn't have to approve anything that it doesn't want to approve, so if you have suggestions or ideas, feel free to share them now or later, but at some point in the near future, you'll be asked to approve it.
Any comments on the letter?
Well, I need a date.
You need a date?
Yes, they want to come and do a presentation to the board.
Oh, this is the Champions for Change.
Yes.
Yes.
So I could do it at the February 18th meeting where the Frenchen team is coming, or March 3rd.
Both are budget hearings as well, correct?
The 18th, yes, but the 3rd, no.
Actually, February 18th, they're not available, but like the 2 in March are.
So, March 3rd, there's no budget, there's just an executive session, temporarily planned, so it'll probably fit in there, wouldn't it?
March 3rd?
If everybody agrees, that's rather than piling things
You
on.
know, let's start that.
Good. Does that sound good, Karen?
Yep.
If it doesn't work for them, we'll come up with another one. Any other questions on the information or comments? Roger, you have any? Okay, linking goals with agenda items. Anybody have anything?
So the winter carnival activities, students first and foremost.
Can we do policy reads, the voter registration?
Those are first and foremost. What about the budget?
Plus, So that's some of the community outreach involved in as well, all the opportunities that we're giving them to come to our meetings and view us online.
Anything else? Jeff, if you're watching, we'll expect your list.
Yes, exactly.
I'll let him know.
What's that?
I'll let him know.
If there are no others, we'll go on to the capital project update. Well, there is an attachment, which is the summary from January 19th. Anything?
You know, we don't always have a lot to share here, because that doesn't mean there's nothing going on, it does mean though that there's some slow progress going on. So what,
Replacing lights, I don't know if you noticed when
Yes.
driving up, around the outside of the gym, those are all new lights.
and those are pointing downward
And up.
to match the dark skies protocol, right?
When I came up, they were lit both ways.
Okay, we'll get back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was lit both ways.
Is that right?
Yeah, on the far side of the gym. Yeah. But yeah, they're going through and replacing all the.
I hadn't seen them on it.
Yeah,
They were just being put in.
Oh, they weren't, yeah, they were, yeah.
They're being installed today.
Yeah.
The wall is being, the upper wall is being poured, right? The concrete
Yeah.
poured. It hasn't really changed much in the last week, I think.
No, and then they had to put the footers here and all that. They're still working on the heating system here in this building, running all the piping and all that, so that's, it's been surprisingly minimally invasive. It really has. There's, in terms of how much, when I talked to Bobby about it last week, he said most of the piping has been run, and over the February break, they were looking to get into individual classrooms and get the piping there so that when the unit events come in, they just hook it up, so. But that won't happen until we're able to shut our entire heating system off. So they are still, working on these little, I say little things, but these are things that come springtime make it hopefully go a little faster.
You might see something at the elementary school coming up. So over the winter long weekend, they will be removing some or all of the front canopy, that's the overhanging roof of the front of the building. And what they need to do, and I'm not sure whether it's some or all, frankly, I think they're still talking about that. But what they need to do is they need to spec out the beams that are going to be supporting the new front entrance. And if you remember some of the drawings, the front entrance is going to be a little more prominent, and that means that it's going to be a peaked front, and there's going to be some pressure-treated beams involved. There's special beams. They have to prepare for all of that because they're going to be installed. They're going to be building it in the summer, but they have to have everything ready to go as early so that they can get all the pressure-treated lumber and all that planned, treated, etc. So they're looking at that February long weekend. So you may, if you drive by the elementary school any time after that, it's possible you'll see a front that looks like it's being dismantled. We're just going to start letting people know that. It's all for good, but it will, as usual, be somewhat of an inconvenience for a bit of time.
Thank you.
I have a question about the executive content here. The last sentence, to date, over 1.1 million has not been committed.
Right, so if you look at contract status summary, which is in the capital project update, and that's not in any executive area, right? So that's public information?
Correct.
Right, so that's public information. That spreadsheet has all of our expenses, and it includes the contracted expenses, those things that our contractor said we are going to do this for this amount of money, that's already defined. And then it has some of the allowances, that's some of the wiggle room when we have to make some changes or make some fixes. We're budgeted for those things, but it includes those allowances. And then it has the change orders when we say we got to do something different and it's going to cost us an additional amount of money. also out of an area of the budget that is intact. So we have budgeted for all of these kinds of things. So that 19 point, whatever it is, $1 million that we budgeted for this includes all of those possibilities. This spreadsheet's keeping track of them. And what it's showing is that of that 19, there it is at the very top line, $19,160,000 that were budgeted. You know, we have an incidental line, 3.8 million. Then we have a subtotal of funds available for construction. The base contracts are much of that, but not all of that. So then there's a contingency fund, there's some approved change orders. But that means that there's still $1.1 million in those allowances, change orders, and other contingency funds that have not been directly allocated.
Got it.
Right, so if we were to finish today based just on what's contracted, we would spend $1.1 million less. We're not really confident that that's what's gonna happen. We think that there are gonna be a need for more changes and allowances, but that's the number we're watching.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No change orders unless they've been added?
Next time.
Next
Okay.
time you'll get a bunch, but they won't be for your approval, because they're all less than, what is it, $30,000 what the board has to approve?
Yeah,
Most of them are less than 15.
right, yep. And hold on, like 5 of them.
We'll still share them all.
Item 7, minutes, that's under the consent agenda. Personnel items, seven items here, so we'll go through these. The first is a teaching staff retirement. Upon the recommended action is upon recommendation of the superintendent, accept the retirement of Ann Paulson, librarian at the elementary school, effective June 30th, 2020. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second by
Yes.
Colleen. Thank you. Discussion?
So we were a little surprised because we didn't know Mrs. Paulson was planning a retirement, but we're very happy for her. She's been with the district for 18 years. She's had a 20-year career as a school librarian. She did some things before that, so in some ways this is her second career. She is a wonderful person, a calming influence on the faculty. And as you know, because you saw her last meeting, there are a number of areas that she and our other librarian, Caitlin Patno, really emphasized. All those resources, all those programs that she was pointing at. So, you know, she has an interesting background, Ms. Paulson. I tried to share some of that with you in her the background information on her. But she's just one of those really, really nice people that we have the good fortune to work with. And, you know, we'll be sorry to say goodbye, but we'll wish her well to well-deserved retirement.
Any other comments, discussion? If not, please, everybody's vote. 5-4-0 against, motion passes. Next is teaching staff maternity leave request. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the maternity leave request. Megan Monahan, kindergarten teacher at the elementary school beginning on or about April 25th, 2020 through June 26, 2020, in accordance with Article 19B of the Lake Placid Education Association's contract dated July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2020. I have a motion to accept this leave.
Yes.
Martha, second. Thank you, Joe. Discussion? Questions? Not. Five, 4-0 against, motion passes. The next is another maternity leave request. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the maternity leave request from Megan Britschneider, math teacher at the middle and high school, effective on or about April 14th, 2020 until June 26, 2020, in accordance with Article 19B of the Lake Placid Education Association's contract dated July 1st, 2017 through June. Questions? Please. And motion passes 5-4-0 against. The next is an extension of maternity leave request. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the extended maternity leave of Megan Brettschneider, math teacher at the middle and high school, effective for the 2020-2021 school year. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Martha. Second.
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. Questions?
So will you just hire a long-term sub for the year for this position?
So our hope, and we'll be posting this soon, we expect, will be to hire a math teacher to replace her for the duration of her maternity leave. That's our hope.
And the motion passes 5-4-0 against. Thank you. Next up is a long-term teaching staff appointment. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Brianna Courier is hereby appointed to the long-term position of special education teacher, replacing Kelly O'Reilly Wimet in the elementary school, commencing on or about February 10th, 2020, until May 4th, 2020. The salary is $42,629. Step 1 for the master's plus 42, prorated of the teacher's salary schedule for the 2019-20 school year. May I have a motion to accept this appointment?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second.
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. Discussion or questions on this? No. Vote. 5-4-0 against. Motion passes. 8F, long-term teaching assistant appointment. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve Naomi Connors, long-term teaching assistant at the elementary school, replacing Brianna Courier, beginning on or about February 10th, 2020 through May 4th, 2020. Salary will be $26,200, prorated, step 1, level 3, for the 2019-2020 school year. May I have a motion to accept this appointment?
Yes.
Thank you, Martha. A second?
Yes.
Thank you, John. Comments, questions? If not, we'll be voting shortly. I asked for a flow chart of all these positions. Karen and I had quite a conversation this morning trying to figure out who's going where.
Yeah, a lot of moving pieces.
There are. Last on personnel is a non-teaching staff work status change. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, increase the hours of Catherine Wright Colbert, physical therapist, from 0.69 FTEs to 0.8 FTEs effective February 5th, 2020. May I have a motion to accept this change?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. Second,
Yes.
Dan. Thanks.
Sorry.
Questions, comments? This was on last. 5-4-0 against, motion passes. Additional action items, polling hour change. Bear with me. Whereas Lake Placid Central School holds its annual school district meeting and election the third Tuesday in May each year, whereas the polling places in the district are at the Lake Placid Elementary School cafeteria and Wilmington Community Center, whereas the polls have been open from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m., whereas Essex County Board of the 2020 year will not allow the use of the voting machines for the annual school district meeting and election, whereas without the use of the voting machines, more time will be needed at the end of the night for tallying the results. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education wishes to change the polling hours from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. to allow for extra time for tallying up the voting results. I have a motion, please. Thank you, Joe. Get a second and then,
Yes.
yep, okay,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
So
Karen?
Why aren't we allowed to use them now all of a sudden?
So every fourth year, there is, the primary is in, and so they won't, there's not enough time for them to let us use the machine in the early voting, is the other part of the problem.
Makes sense. I'm pretty sure I won't do it. Yeah, exactly.
Vote is 5-0, the motion passes. The next, the donation acceptance, which is under consent, as was special education, unless there are questions on the February 18th packet. If not, go to the cause, we'll move by. Adjournment will be in two phases. First will be the old business, new business, and next meeting locations, and then we'll conclude the adjournment after the proposed executive session that's coming up. So the first phase is next meeting dates and locations. February 18th is a board meeting, and if needed, budget workshop, which it sounds like we probably will. Yes? Yep.
And this is also, we're gonna have a presentation by the prevention team at the 18th meeting.
Okay. And that brings up the question, would you like to have the budget workshop prior to the meeting? Or sort of like we did tonight, we opened the meeting and then had the executive session, so opening the meeting early at 6 o'clock or 6:15 and then having the budget. Does that work for people?
I would rather go earlier, not at the end.
Does that work, Joe? Dan?
So 6 o'clock?
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions on the rest of those dates? Old agenda topics, the sports merger, I think that'll come up in the budget talks. New agenda topics,
I wanted to add something for a future consideration. I've been cogitating about a dashboard for us to use for the outward-facing aspect of the organization. And I would love to discuss that with you and get your insights at some point in the future.
okay. You want, so after the budget vote, before the budget vote, are you?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Wherever
Okay.
it fits.
We'll discuss it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should we include the upcoming projects in for discussion? Projects meaning WARDA,
Oh, for additional,
for new topic items, I think we need to start moving on.
Organization should not be named.
Yes. Perhaps inviting them in, and I like your idea of some sort of a.
Is there something else on the Tuesday?
Anything else for new agenda? If not, I'd like to propose the executive session for stage 2 union grievance hearing and negotiation discussion.
Your question about
The recommended action is the motion to go into executive session for the purpose of union grievance hearing and negotiation discussions. May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Joan. Second. Thank you, Colleen. All in favor? Put us down 5-4-0. Did everybody get the opportunity to read the executive content? Especially for this first